"You're not welcome at Christmas this year," my dad snapped. "All right," I said, moving the $8,000 holiday fund I'd sent him back into my account and canceling the chalet reservation under his name. By morning, I had 31 missed calls and one message that actually made me laugh out loud. You ever felt like you were invisible in your own family? Like no matter what you did, you were always the outsider, desperate for a shred of recognition? For me, that feeling culminated in one brutal Christmas betrayal that changed everything. See, I'm Travis, I'm 28, and my family, well, we've always had this complicated dynamic. On the surface, we probably looked like something out of a magazine, Dad in his suits, always convinced he knew best. Mom, forever trying to keep the peace, but somehow always siding with him. And then there's Rachel, my younger sister, the golden child. That girl could set the house on fire and still be called spirited. Me? I was the one who worked hard, kept my head down, and still always seemed to be treated like an afterthought. Christmas was their stage every single year. It was always the same script. Rachel got all the attention, Dad made grand speeches about family values, and Mom busied herself making everything look perfect, totally ignoring the snide comments and passive-aggressive digs that were always aimed my way. I learned to just take it, you know? The comparisons, the little reminders that I wasn't quite one of them in the way Rachel was. But this past year, something in me genuinely thought things might finally be different. I had a good job, stable income, and for the first time, I actually wanted to contribute to the holiday, to make it feel like I wasn't just tagging along. That's how the chalet idea came up. I found this incredible cabin-style place up in the mountains. Imagine, snow everywhere, a roaring, wood-burning fireplace, huge windows looking out over the slopes. It was the kind of holiday getaway people put on postcards. I spent weeks searching for the perfect spot, meticulously calculating my budget, and eventually, I booked the whole thing. $8,000, gone in a blink. But I thought it would be worth it. I truly believed maybe, just maybe, this year they'd see that I cared, that I wanted to be a bigger part of our family Christmas. I even sent Dad the reservation confirmation so he could brag about it to his friends. His reaction? Not a thank you. He just said something like, "Good. That's the least you could do." At the time, I brushed it off. That was just Dad, never really giving me credit, but also, never saying no. But as December crept closer, the cracks started showing again. Rachel, of course, kept calling it her chalet trip, like I'd booked it just for her. She even posted about it on social media, writing, "Can't wait for our family Christmas at the chalet Dad rented." That one stung. I wasn't even mentioned. When I asked her why she phrased it like that, she just laughed. "Relax, Travis. No one cares who booked it. It's all Dad's idea anyway." That should have been my first real warning. But I still held on to this naive hope. I wanted to believe that once we arrived, they'd surprise me with some gratitude. Instead, things came to a head on an ordinary Wednesday night in early December. I'd stopped by my parents' house after work, just to drop off some decorations I'd picked up. They were in the living room, sipping wine, exactly as always. Rachel was sprawled on the couch, going on about her ski outfits. I was halfway through telling them how I'd stocked up on groceries for the chalet when Dad cut me off. "You're not invited to Christmas this year." He just snapped it out, like he was telling me to take out the trash. I froze. The words didn't even register at first. "What?" I asked, thinking I'd misheard him. "You heard me," he said flatly, swirling his wine glass. "It's going to be a family-only Christmas. We don't need complications. You can do your own thing." I remember laughing under my breath, more out of sheer disbelief than humor. "Family only? I'm literally your son." Rachel just smirked at me from the couch. "Dad just means it's going to be less stressful without you. Don't make a scene, Travis." And Mom, sweet, always neutral Mom, just gave me that pitying look, like I was a stranger asking for a place to stay. "Maybe it's for the best, dear. We want peace this year." I can't even explain what I felt in that moment. Hurt. Yes. Betrayal? Of course. But mostly, it was this cold, piercing clarity, like a curtain had dropped and I was finally seeing them for what they really were. For years, I'd been chasing scraps of validation, hoping to belong. And in one sentence, Dad made it crystal clear I never really did. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I just nodded. I set the box of decorations down on the floor and said, "Fine." They probably thought I was sulking, that I'd go home and cry about being left out. But in reality, my mind was already moving. I remembered that chalet reservation sitting in my inbox. The one booked under my name, with my card, my money. And as I walked out of their house that night, their smug faces behind me, I realized something. They thought they had Christmas wrapped up. They thought they could just erase me like I was nothing. They had no idea what was coming. That night, I sat at my laptop. I pulled up the bank transfers and quietly moved the holiday fund I'd sent to Dad back into my account. $8,000 slid right back where it belonged. Then, I opened the chalet booking. With a single click, I canceled the entire reservation. No penalty. It was still early enough. The best part? The booking was technically under Dad's name on the paperwork. I'd wanted him to feel involved, remember? But the payments? Those were mine. Meaning when the cancellation went through, the credit returned to me. I didn't tell them, of course. I went to bed with this strange, quiet calm, half expecting some kind of fallout. And sure enough, the next morning, my phone lit up like a Christmas tree. 31 missed calls, a dozen voicemails, and one message that just stopped me in my tracks. And that's exactly where things really began to unravel. The message was from my dad. Short, clipped, the kind of thing he sent when he still thought he had complete control. Call me back. Now. I didn't. I sat there with my coffee, scrolling through his previous voicemails, each one angrier than the last. First, it was confusion. Travis, there's some kind of mistake. The chalet reservation isn't showing up on my account. Call them and fix it. Then it shifted to irritation. This isn't funny. If you're pulling some stunt, you better undo it immediately. And finally, the inevitable rage. You think this makes you clever? You've embarrassed me, Travis. Do you understand that? Fix this. Now. Embarrassed him. That's what mattered most. Not the fact that his son was supposedly not invited to Christmas. Not the sheer audacity of cutting me out after I'd paid for everything. No, the great sin here was that his friends and extended family would soon find out the big chalet trip wasn't happening. His pride was hurt, and in his world, that was unforgivable. By noon, Rachel started messaging me too. Her tone was almost worse than Dad's. Less angry, more entitled. Are you seriously doing this to us? You promised we'd have Christmas at the chalet. All my friends know about it, Travis. I already told everyone. Do you even care what this does to me? I could almost hear her whining voice through the text. I didn't reply. Silence was more powerful than anything I could have typed back. That evening, though, the real games began. Mom showed up at my apartment unannounced, holding a casserole, just like she always did when she wanted to soften bad news. She let herself in with the spare key I hadn't even realized she still had. Travis, she said in that practiced sweet tone, I think we got off on the wrong foot last night. You know your father. He speaks harshly sometimes. He didn't mean you weren't invited. It was just tension talking. I looked at her, genuinely curious. So now I'm invited? Her smile faltered, but she pressed on. Of course, but only if you fix the chalet issue. Your father's reputation is on the line. People are expecting this trip. It would mean so much to everyone if you just handled it quietly. The manipulation was so transparent, it almost made me laugh. It wasn't about me being included. It was about me cleaning up their mess. I asked, and if I don't? She put the casserole down on my counter, folded her hands together like she was praying, and sighed. Then I'm afraid you'll be making things very difficult for this family. Do you really want to ruin Christmas for your sister? There it was again. Always Rachel. Always her happiness above all else. I remembered birthdays where she got expensive gifts and I got practical ones like socks. I remembered the time she crashed my car and my parents told me to stop being selfish because Rachel's been through enough stress. The same pattern was playing out again. My sacrifice, her spotlight. I didn't give Mom the reaction she wanted. I just said, thanks for the casserole, and walked her to the door. She looked at me with this sad little expression, like I was the problem child throwing a tantrum, and said, your father's very disappointed in you. That night, I got added to a new group chat Rachel created. The name of it? Christmas at the Chalet Christmas Tree Snowflake. The irony nearly killed me. She must not have realized I'd canceled everything, because the messages were filled with her gushing about ski outfits, champagne, and the Instagram photos she'd take by the fireplace. Dad chimed in once with, I'll handle the wine. Don't worry. Mom sent emojis. It was like they were trying to pretend I wasn't even there, even though I was the one who had made it possible. Finally, Rachel tagged me. Travis, can you send the updated booking confirmation? Dad wants to make sure the dinner reservations are lined up. I stared at the message for a long time, debating what to do. Every instinct told me to blast the truth right there in the chat, to expose them for the greedy, entitled family they'd always been. But something inside me whispered that it wasn't time. Not yet. Let them spin their fantasies a little longer. Let them believe everything was under control. The longer they dangled on the hook, the sweeter it would be when reality finally snapped tight. The tension only escalated from there. Over the next week, they began dropping hints to extended family members, boasting about the chalet trip, making it clear that Rachel was somehow hosting it. One of my aunts even called me, confused, saying, "Your sister told me you're not coming this year. That can't be right, can it?" When I told her calmly that Dad had uninvited me, she gasped and said, "But you're the one who paid." Word started spreading. I could feel their perfect little facade cracking at the edges. And with every crack, their texts grew more frantic, more desperate. But nothing prepared me for the night Dad himself showed up at my apartment door. Not with anger this time, but with something far worse, fake charm. He stood there in his pressed coat, holding a bottle of wine, like we were old friends. "Travis, son," he said smoothly, "we need to talk about this chalet situation. I know you're upset, but let's be adults. We can work something out." And that's when I realized they weren't just panicking. They were scheming. Dad didn't step inside right away. He lingered at the doorway like a salesman, the kind who won't leave until you sign on the dotted line. He was smiling, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was the tight, calculated kind I'd seen him use in business meetings when I was younger, the kind that meant he was already thinking 10 steps ahead, and I was just another pawn. "Can I come in?" he asked finally. I hesitated, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened the door wider and let him in. He set the bottle of wine on my counter without asking, like he owned the place. We sat across from each other, the silence stretching. Then he leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and said, "Listen, about what I said the other night. Not invited." That was harsh. I was frustrated. You know how things get. I didn't answer. I just let him keep talking. He shifted in his seat. "Your sister's been under a lot of stress lately. Her job's shaky. She's worried about money, and this chalet trip, well, it's important for her. She wants to impress her friends, keep her reputation intact. You understand, don't you?" There it was, the speech I'd been expecting. Rachel's feelings as the ultimate priority, again. My role was to patch up her life, to make sure she always looked good while I stayed invisible. Dad cleared his throat and leaned back. "So here's what we'll do. You'll rebook the chalet, use your card again. I know you can afford it. Put it under my name so I can manage things properly. In return, we'll talk about making you more involved in family decisions moving forward. You want that, right? To be part of things." The words hit me harder than I expected. More involved? As if I hadn't been trying to be part of things all along. As if belonging to my own family was some kind of reward he could dangle in front of me, if only I paid the price. I kept my voice steady. "So, let me get this straight. You want me to rebook an $8,000 trip after you told me I wasn't invited, just so Rachel doesn't get embarrassed?" His smile faltered for a fraction of a second before snapping back in place. "It's not about embarrassment. It's about family unity. You wouldn't want to be responsible for ruining Christmas, would you?" I almost laughed. Family unity. The phrase sounded ridiculous coming from him. But I stayed quiet, letting the silence grow heavier. Dad hated silence. He always rushed to fill it. And sure enough, he started talking again, but this time his tone hardened. "If you refuse, Travis, you're making a very clear statement. You're telling your mother, your sister, everyone, that you don't care about them. And if that's the road you want to take." He paused, eyes narrowing. "Then don't expect us to be there for you when you need us." That was the real betrayal, not the words themselves. I'd known deep down for years they'd never really be there for me. It was the coldness behind them, the transactional way he laid it out. Family, to him, wasn't love or loyalty. It was leverage. I swallowed hard, keeping my emotions in check. "So, you're threatening to cut me off unless I pay for everything again?" Dad leaned back, crossing his arms. "Not a threat, just reality. You're old enough to understand how the world works. Nothing's free." That line broke something in me. I remembered all the times I'd gone out of my way to help them. The loans I gave when Dad's investments tanked. The weekends I spent fixing things around their house. The endless patience I'd shown while Rachel was praised for doing the bare minimum. And here he was, looking me dead in the eye and saying none of it mattered unless I opened my wallet again. I don't know if he saw the shift in my expression, but for the first time that night, I think he realized I wasn't going to cave. His fake charm cracked just slightly, and he muttered, "Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Travis." But the betrayal wasn't finished. 2 days later, I got a call from my bank. A flagged transaction. Someone had tried to use my account details to make a large purchase. A reservation deposit for a chalet. And the name on the attempted booking? My father's. That was the moment the last thread of trust snapped. When the bank told me about the attempted booking, my first reaction wasn't even anger. It was this strange, hollow feeling, like the floor had dropped out from under me. I'd suspected Dad might try to manipulate me, but I hadn't expected him to stoop so low as to actually attempt fraud with my own information. The bank rep explained gently that the transaction had been flagged because the billing name didn't match the account holder. Otherwise, it might have gone through. I thanked them, hung up, and sat there staring at my phone, numb. My own father had tried to steal from me. There was no longer even a thin veil of family loyalty holding us together. This was survival for him. If he couldn't control me with words, he'd try with money. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed replaying everything. Rachel posting about her chalet. Mom showing up with her casserole and guilt trips. Dad's smug smile in my apartment. And now this. The betrayal was layered, heavy, and for the first time in my life, I realized something that both terrified and freed me. I didn't have a family. Not really. The next few days were brutal. Rachel went into overdrive on social media, painting me as the villain. She wrote some vague post about selfish people who ruin everything. And of course, all her friends chimed in with sympathy. A cousin even texted me privately saying, "Did you really cancel Christmas?" Just like that, the narrative had shifted. I wasn't just left out anymore. I was being painted as the bad guy. The reason the family was falling apart. Mom sent message after message begging me to just fix this. She said things like, "Your father is under so much stress," and Rachel's heartbroken. You know how important this is to her. Not once did she ask how I was doing. Not once did she acknowledge what they'd done to me. At work, I found it hard to focus. I'd be sitting at my desk, spreadsheets open, but my mind would drift back to the look in Dad's eyes when he said, "Nothing's free." The words echoed like a curse, reminding me that in his world, love came with a price tag. My performance slipped. I stayed late just to avoid going home and sitting alone in the silence, and the loneliness hit me hard. Christmas lights went up around the city. Couples strolled hand in hand through decorated streets. Kids pressed their faces against toy store windows. Everywhere I looked, people were wrapped in warmth, laughter, togetherness. And me? I had a one-bedroom apartment and a stack of unanswered messages reminding me how unwanted I was. I'll admit, there was one night where I almost broke. I sat with my phone in my hand, thumb hovering over the "Call Dad" button, thinking maybe if I just apologized, maybe if I just gave in, I'd get my family back. But then I remembered the bank call, the fraudulent booking, and the hollow in my chest filled with something different. Resolve. That was the turning point. I started small. I pulled together every document I had. Emails confirming the chalet was booked under my name, the cancellation refund, the flagged fraud notice from the bank. I backed up Rachel's posts, her texts demanding I fix things, Dad's threatening voicemails. For the first time, I stopped reacting emotionally and started looking at the situation like a chess game. Every move they made, I'd counter. I didn't tell them what I was doing. On the surface, I went quiet. I stopped answering calls, ignored the guilt-ridden messages, let them believe I was sulking in shame. Meanwhile, I was laying bricks for something stronger, something they wouldn't see coming. But before I could even put my plan in motion, they managed to push me lower. One evening, about a week before Christmas, I came home to find an envelope taped to my door. Inside was a typed letter, cold, formal. It was from Dad, though unsigned. In it, he stated that I was no longer welcome at family gatherings until I learned to respect the sacrifices they had made for me. He wrote that Rachel deserved the chalet because she had proven herself loyal, while I had only brought conflict and embarrassment. And the last line? I'll never forget it. "You are not needed in this family, Travis. Consider this your warning." I sat on the floor of my apartment, letter in hand, staring at those words until the letters blurred. That was rock bottom. The kind of pain that settles deep in your chest and refuses to move. But even in that pit, something inside me shifted again. The boy who had always craved their approval, always bent himself to fit their mold, that boy was gone. What remained was quieter, sharper, more deliberate. I wasn't going to fight for their love anymore. I was going to make sure they understood what it felt like to lose something they thought they controlled. And so, in the silence of that empty apartment, I began to plan. After that letter, something inside me snapped into focus. It was like my entire life up until that moment had been spent waiting for a nod of approval that was never coming. And suddenly, I realized I didn't need it anymore. Their words, "You are not needed in this family," instead of crushing me, gave me a strange kind of freedom. If I wasn't needed, then I owed them nothing. And if I owed them nothing, I could finally start living on my own terms. The first step was cutting off the lifelines they'd been quietly draining. For years, I'd been helping in ways I never really acknowledged. When Rachel overdrafted her account, I'd quietly sent her money. When Dad's investments dipped, I'd covered a bill here and there. Even little things, groceries, gas, utilities, I'd chipped in more often than not. It was a habit born from guilt, from always wanting to prove I belonged. But no more. I shut it all down. Changed my online banking passwords, canceled the spare credit card Mom had access to for emergencies, even rerouted my mail so they couldn't snoop. It was like turning off a series of taps that had been leaking for years. Then I turned inward. At work, instead of dragging my feet, I started showing up early, putting in real effort, volunteering for projects I used to avoid. I think part of me needed to bury myself in something productive, but another part knew that every hour I invested in myself was a step further away from their shadow. Within weeks, my boss noticed. By the new year, I was sitting in a meeting hearing the words promotion and salary increase. For the first time, I felt momentum. My bank account grew. My evenings weren't spent scrolling through their manipulative messages. I deleted them all. Instead, I started going to the gym after work, something I'd put off for years. The weights, the sweat, the small but steady progress, it all became a ritual. My body grew stronger, my confidence steadier. I wasn't the same guy who sat on the floor clutching that letter anymore. The change bled into other areas of my life. I reconnected with old friends I'd distanced myself from because my family never liked them. One of them, a college buddy named Mason, ran his own small marketing business and invited me to help out with some freelance work. What started as a side project quickly turned into a significant stream of income. Mason even joked, "Man, you've been hiding your skills too long. If your family doesn't appreciate you, don't worry. Other people will." Those words stuck. For so long, I'd measured my worth by their standards. But outside their bubble, I was valued, respected, even admired. And here's where the real power shift began. Remember all the documents I'd been quietly gathering? The chalet receipts, Rachel's posts, the bank fraud alert, Dad's voicemail. I started putting them together like puzzle pieces, not out of spite at first, but as a reminder to myself. I wasn't crazy. The evidence was right there. They had tried to erase me, manipulate me, even steal from me. And I had the proof. The more I looked at it, the clearer it became. If I wanted revenge, it wouldn't be through yelling matches or emotional pleas. It would be through precision, through patience, through letting them dig their own hole while I stood at the edge with the spotlight. Meanwhile, life outside their orbit only got brighter. Mason introduced me to contacts who opened doors I never imagined. New contracts, bigger clients, more income than I'd ever had before. I moved into a bigger apartment, one with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. Every night I'd stand there, glass of wine in hand, looking at the lights twinkling across the horizon, and think, this is mine, not theirs. Mine. It wasn't about money or status. It was about finally building something they couldn't touch, something they couldn't claim credit for or take away. And every step forward fueled the fire in me, not of desperation anymore, but of quiet, burning resolve. They still sent messages, of course. Rachel tried the guilt angle. "You're ruining everything. Why are you doing this to us?" Dad sent veiled threats about burning bridges. Mom played the martyr, writing things like, "I lie awake at night worrying about you." But where those words once cut, now they barely grazed me. I didn't even reply. Silence became my sharpest weapon. Because deep down, I knew something they didn't. They had already lost their grip on me. And soon, they'd lose a lot more than that. But I wasn't going to rush it. I was going to let time and success do their work. Let them grow comfortable in their illusions. Because when the moment came to strike back, it wouldn't just be satisfying, it would be undeniable. And then one afternoon, I learned something that changed everything. Something that turned all my quiet planning into a clear, sharp path toward revenge. The opportunity came on an ordinary Tuesday, the kind of day where nothing feels remarkable until something shifts beneath the surface. I was in Mason's office, helping him prep a presentation for a new client. While he took a call, I scrolled through my email and noticed a message from my aunt, the same one who'd called me confused weeks earlier about the chalet. She was different from the rest of the family. Not perfect, but less cruel, more observant. The subject line read, "Thought you should see this." Attached was a PDF, a scanned copy of an email chain between my dad and several extended relatives. My heart pounded as I read. In it, Dad had written, "Rachel will be covering Christmas costs this year. She stepped up as the responsible one, and Travis has decided he's not able to contribute. He's embarrassed, so let's not bring it up in front of him." My stomach turned. Responsible one? Rachel hadn't even chipped in a dime, and Dad was rewriting the story to make me look like the failure. Worse, he was planting the idea that I couldn't afford things, that I was somehow beneath them. But as sick as it made me, the email was gold. It proved what I'd suspected all along, that their game wasn't just about cutting me out. It was about erasing me, rewriting the family narrative so I'd be seen as weak, selfish, disposable. And in that moment, something clicked in my mind. If they wanted to play with stories, then I'd make sure the truth told itself loudly, unmistakably, in a way they couldn't twist. The timing was perfect, too. My promotion had just gone through, doubling my salary. The freelance contracts with Mason were thriving. My savings account looked healthier than it ever had. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving. I was in a position of strength, financially stable, professionally respected, socially connected. All the pieces of a life they couldn't touch. That night, I started sketching out what I called the unveiling. Step 1. Document everything. I organized a folder on my laptop with labeled files, screenshots of Rachel's social media posts bragging about her chalet, bank statements proving the money came from me, the cancellation receipt, the fraud alert, and now Dad's email chain. Every lie they told had a paper trail, and I had it. Step 2. Allies. My aunt was already halfway there by sending me the email. I reached out to her cautiously at first, just to test the waters. Over coffee, she admitted she'd long suspected my parents favored Rachel unfairly, but hadn't realized how deep it ran. "Your father's pride is his weakness," she told me. "And Rachel, well, she believes whatever makes her look good." Her words stuck like pins on a map. Weaknesses, patterns, places to strike. Step 3. Position myself where they least expect it. Instead of isolating, I started showing up at extended family gatherings again. Birthdays, casual dinners, anything that wasn't at my parents' house. At first, there were whispers, side glances, the awkwardness of people who didn't know which version of the story to believe. But I stayed calm, polite, present. I didn't defend myself. I didn't bring up the chalet. I just let them see me. Steady job, new apartment, healthier, happier. Slowly, the doubt began to creep in. People noticed Rachel's gloating didn't match the reality they saw in me. And all the while, I kept building. Mason introduced me to someone who worked in event planning, and through that connection, I got the idea for the final stage of my plan. If my parents wanted to use family gatherings as their stage, then I'd make sure the biggest spotlight of all landed directly on them when the time was right. Because here's the thing about power. It's not always about having the loudest voice or the strongest grip. Sometimes it's about patience, about quietly stepping out of the shadows, stacking the evidence, aligning the pieces, and waiting until your opponents are so sure they've won that they never see the ground crumbling beneath them. By the time Christmas passed, my parents thought they'd succeeded. They spent the holidays sulking in their house. No chalet, no trip, but they spun the story that it was my fault, that I'd ruined everything. Rachel made a show of posting pictures with friends at some ski resort she'd tagged for clout, pretending it was the chalet. To the outside world, it looked like they were unbothered. But I knew the truth, and I knew what was coming. Because the next step wasn't just about defending myself. It was about turning the tables, about showing them, in front of everyone they tried to deceive, that the son they dismissed, erased, and tried to steal from wasn't weak. He was the one holding the cards. and the chance to flip the board was closer than they realized. The stage for my revenge arrived almost too perfectly. Late January, my aunt called to let me know there was going to be a big family gathering for my grandparents' anniversary. It wasn't just cousins and uncles this time. It was everyone. Aunts, uncles, family friends, even some of Dad's business associates who'd known me since I was a kid. In other words, the exact audience my parents loved to perform for. The moment I hung up, I knew this was it. The unveiling. I spent the next week polishing the folder of evidence I compiled. Every receipt, every screenshot, every voicemail was neatly arranged into a presentation file, one that I could pull up on my laptop and mirror onto a screen if needed. But the beauty of my plan was that I didn't even have to shout or accuse. I just had to show the truth calmly, methodically, and let their own words do the damage. The night of the anniversary, I walked into the banquet hall wearing the suit I'd bought with my promotion bonus. Crisp, tailored, a quiet statement. I wasn't the struggling black sheep they'd painted me as. I shook hands, smiled, accepted compliments about how well I looked. My parents noticed me immediately. Dad stiffened. Mom's polite smile faltered, and Rachel rolled her eyes like I'd crashed her event. I could feel their discomfort simmering, and it only fueled me further. Dinner was served, wine poured, speeches made. Then came the casual conversations at the tables. I waited until Rachel brought up the chalet, because of course she couldn't resist. She laughed loudly, telling a cousin, "It was such a disaster because Travis bailed last minute." Honestly, Dad and I had to scramble to make Christmas decent, but some people just can't handle responsibility. Her words were bait, and I took them. Calmly, I set down my glass and said, "That's interesting, Rachel, because from where I sit, it looked a little different." The table went quiet. Dad immediately interjected, his voice smooth but tense. "Let's not air family drama here. Tonight's about your grandparents." I smiled. "I agree. It's about family, which is why it might be nice for everyone to know the full story, since you've already started it, Rachel." I pulled my laptop from my bag. I hadn't planned to make it theatrical, but sometimes the moment demands it. A projector had been set up for a slideshow of old photos, so I asked my cousin to help me switch inputs. Within seconds, my screen lit up the wall, and then I showed them. First, the chalet confirmation email with my name and payment clearly visible. Gasps went around the room. Then the cancellation notice, showing the refund had gone directly back to me. Then Rachel's post bragging about her chalet, followed by Dad's email chain claiming Rachel had paid for everything. And finally, the flagged fraud notice from the bank with his name on it. I didn't raise my voice once. I didn't accuse or dramatize. I just said, "This is what happened. I paid for the chalet. They told me I wasn't invited. And when I canceled it, they tried to use my account information without permission." The silence that followed was suffocating. You could hear forks clink against plates. My parents' faces were pale, frozen. Rachel sputtered something about me twisting things, but the evidence was right there, undeniable. Then came the whispers. My uncle muttering. I knew something was off. My aunt shaking her head. Even one of Dad's business friends leaned back and said under his breath, "Unbelievable." And for once, I wasn't the outsider. I wasn't the one being dismissed. I was the one holding the truth, and everyone in that room knew it. Dad tried to salvage it. He stood up, glass in hand, and said, "Let's not blow this out of proportion. It was a misunderstanding," but I cut him off, still calm. A misunderstanding is forgetting to invite someone. This was deliberate, and I think everyone here deserves to know what family values mean to you. The word values hung in the air like a blade. Mom finally broke down, whispering, "Travis, please stop." But it was too late. The damage was done. Their carefully crafted facade had shattered in front of the very people they wanted most to impress. I didn't stay much longer after that. I didn't need to. As I left the banquet hall, I could still hear the murmurs, the questions being fired at them. For the first time in my life, the weight was no longer on me. It was on them. And the satisfaction of that moment, walking out into the cold night air with my head high, was unlike anything I'd ever felt. But the fallout, that was only beginning. The fallout was immediate, and for once, I didn't have to lift a finger. The morning after the anniversary gathering, my phone buzzed nonstop. Not from my parents, they stayed silent, but from cousins, uncles, and even family friends who'd been there. The messages all had the same tone: disbelief, sympathy, quiet validation. "I can't believe they treated you that way. You were right to show everyone. If you ever want to spend the holidays with us instead, you're welcome." Word spread quickly. My parents' reputation, the thing they guarded most fiercely, was in tatters. Dad's colleagues who had been at the banquet stopped returning his calls. A business contact of his, one who had overheard the whole chalet debacle, ended a partnership, citing concerns about integrity. For a man who lived off appearances, it was the equivalent of watching his empire crumble. Rachel tried damage control on social media, posting vague statements about toxic siblings and jealousy, but no one bought it. Screenshots of her original bragging posts had already circulated among the family. Every attempt she made to paint herself as the victim only dug her deeper. Friends she'd tried so hard to impress unfollowed her. Her little circle of admirers shrank overnight. And Mom, she withdrew completely. For years, she played peacemaker, smoothing over Dad's outbursts and Rachel's entitlement. But after that night, no one was listening to her "let's just move on" speeches anymore. People saw her silence for what it was, complicity. I stayed quiet. I didn't need to gloat. Didn't need to say a word. The silence I once hated had become my sharpest weapon, and it worked better than anything else. Weeks passed, and the distance grew. No more calls, no more guilt trips, no more letters taped to my door. It was as if they finally realized they had no leverage left. And the best part? I didn't miss them. For the first time in my life, I felt lighter. I had my job, my friends, my growing independence. I had peace. Then one afternoon in March, I ran into my aunt again at a cafe. She told me that Dad had tried hosting a dinner to clear the air, but barely anyone showed up. The family wasn't interested in playing along with his version of reality anymore. "You don't realize it yet," she told me, smiling. "But you won. Not just against them, but against the hold they had on you." That night, I went home, stood at the window of my apartment, and looked out over the city lights. For years, I'd begged for a seat at their table, twisted myself to fit their mold, and carried the weight of their approval like a burden I couldn't shake. But I didn't need it anymore. I had built something stronger, something they couldn't rewrite or take away. Their chalet trip had collapsed. Their reputation had cracked. Their hold on me was gone. And as I turned away from the glass, a smile tugged at my lips. Because the truth was, they hadn't uninvited me from Christmas. I had uninvited them from my life. That night, standing by my apartment window, looking out at the city lights, the relief was almost suffocating. For years, I'd been trying to earn a place at a table that was never truly set for me. Now, the table was gone, and I felt nothing but a strange, profound lightness. They hadn't uninvited me from Christmas. I had uninvited them from my life. And that knowledge, that power, hummed beneath my skin like a quiet, steady current. The immediate aftermath was peaceful, eerily so at first. The constant buzz of my phone died down. No more furious voicemails from Dad, no more desperate, manipulative texts from Rachel, no more guilt-laden messages from Mom. It was as if a cacophony I hadn't even realized I was living with had suddenly gone silent. I found myself checking my phone less, breathing deeper. The tightness in my chest, a permanent fixture for as long as I could remember, began to loosen. My job continued to thrive. With the mental weight of my family lifted, I found a focus I hadn't known I possessed. I wasn't staying late out of obligation or avoidance anymore, but because I genuinely enjoyed the challenge. My boss, a shrewd but fair man named Mr. Davies, pulled me aside a few weeks after the anniversary party. He'd heard whispers, of course, the kind that travel through extended family networks like wildfire. He just looked at me, a knowing glint in his eye, and said, "Travis, whatever baggage you were carrying, you've dropped it. You're performing like a different man. Keep this up, and there's no telling how far you can go." His words weren't a challenge. They were an affirmation. My social life flourished too. Mason and I started working together more often, building his marketing business. It was invigorating to collaborate with someone who saw my potential, who valued my ideas, who didn't constantly compare me to some invisible, idealized sibling. We'd spend evenings after client meetings just talking, not about family drama, but about life, ambitions, silly stuff. He introduced me to his circle of friends, people who had no preconceived notions about me, no expectations of the black sheep. They just saw me for me. I started hiking again, a passion I'd abandoned years ago because it didn't fit into my family's idea of a productive weekend. I bought new gear, explored new trails, and found solace in the quiet grandeur of the mountains. Each step was a tangible reminder of my newfound freedom. The biggest shift, though, was internal. The boy who'd yearned for approval was gone, replaced by a man who understood his worth. I realized how much emotional labor I'd been doing for them, constantly trying to anticipate their needs, deflect their passive aggression, and justify my own existence. Without that burden, I felt an almost physical expansion, a sense of space in my own head and heart that I hadn't known was missing. It was like living in color after a lifetime in black and white. Occasionally, I'd still hear things through my aunt. She'd call, always carefully, after work. "Your mother's not doing well," she'd say, her voice laced with genuine concern. "She's upset no one's talking to her." Or, "Your father's reputation has taken a hit. He lost that big contract with Sterling Corporation." And then, of course, Rachel. She's posting even more frantically, trying to curate this perfect life, but it just looks desperate. My aunt never pressed me to do anything, just delivered the news like a neutral observer. I'd listen, acknowledge, and thank her for the update. And each time, I felt a pang, not of regret, but of a quiet, weary sadness for the life they had chosen and for the people they had become. But the desire to re-engage, to step back into that toxic dance, was gone. Completely. Spring turned into summer, and my life continued its upward trajectory. I signed my first major independent contract through Mason's Network, a project that more than doubled my monthly income from my regular job. I even bought a new car, nothing flashy, but it was mine, bought with money I earned, not justified by some imagined family need. I started seeing someone, Sarah. She was smart, kind, and laughed easily. She knew my story, or at least the bare bones of it, and her reaction wasn't pity, but admiration for how I'd rebuilt my life. It was refreshing, terrifyingly new, to be truly seen and accepted without any hidden agenda. Then came the first real test, a true turning point in my detachment. It was late summer when I received a formal letter, not from my parents, but from a legal firm. It was regarding my grandparents' estate. My grandfather, a quiet, gentle man who had always been overshadowed by Dad, had passed away a few months prior, and the will was finally being read. I hadn't known he was sick. My parents had kept it from me, naturally. The letter stated I was a beneficiary and requested my presence at a reading in 2 weeks. My stomach dropped. A cold dread, familiar and unwelcome, washed over me. This was it, the direct confrontation I had avoided. I called my aunt. "Did you know about this?" "Yes, dear," she said, her voice soft. "Your grandfather loved you very much, you know. He often spoke about how hard you worked. I think he saw a lot of himself in you." She hesitated. "Your father and Rachel, they're not happy about it." No surprise there. The day of the will reading arrived like a storm front. I walked into the lawyer's office, heart thumping, to find my parents, Rachel, and my aunt already seated. The room was tense, the air thick with unspoken animosity. Dad sat stiffly, his face a mask of indignation. Rachel was fiddling with her phone, a look of petulant entitlement plastered on her features. Mom, as always, looked fragile, her eyes darting nervously between Dad and me. My aunt offered me a small, supportive smile. The lawyer, a stern woman with sharp eyes, began to read. My grandfather had left his modest home, a quaint house in the countryside, to my aunt. He'd left various sentimental items to other relatives. Then came the part that sent a shockwave through the room. "And to my grandson, Travis," the lawyer read, her voice clear, "I bequeath a trust fund in the amount of $500,000 to be invested and managed independently, with full access granted upon his 30th birthday. This is for his future, a testament to his character and resilience, and my hope that he will continue to forge his own path." The silence was deafening. $500,000. I felt a dizzying surge of disbelief. I looked at my parents. Dad's face was a mottled shade of red, his jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. Rachel gasped, then muttered, "What? Are you serious?" Mom's eyes welled up, but I couldn't tell if it was for me or for the money her own son had just inherited. Dad finally exploded. "This is outrageous. Travis hasn't done anything to deserve this. I'm his father. He should be investing that money into the family." His voice boomed, completely disregarding the lawyer's professional demeanor. The lawyer, unflappable, simply raised a hand. Mr. Dad's last name. Your father's wishes are clearly stated and legally binding. The trust is irrevocable. Rachel chimed in, her voice shrill. But he literally canceled Christmas on us. He alienated the whole family. How could Grandpa reward him for that? She turned to me, her eyes blazing with raw jealousy. You think you're so clever, don't you? You always wanted to be the special one. I just sat there, taking it all in. My emotions were a whirlwind, but beneath the shock and the anger, there was a profound sense of vindication. Grandpa had seen me. He had quietly recognized my struggle, my efforts, my need for an independent foundation. He had given me a gift that was not just financial, but deeply symbolic. Validation from someone who truly cared, freed from their control. I looked directly at Dad, then at Rachel, then at Mom. My voice was calm, steady, betraying none of the turmoil within. You uninvited me from Christmas. You tried to commit fraud with my bank account. You sent me a letter saying I wasn't needed. Grandpa, it seems, disagreed. Their faces crumpled. It was the first time I had truly seen them speechless, truly stripped of their self-righteous indignation. They had no comeback, no manipulation that could negate the clear, legal truth of my grandfather's will. The lawyer ended the meeting swiftly, leaving them sputtering and red-faced. My aunt squeezed my arm as we left, a look of profound relief on her face. He knew, Travis, she whispered. He really knew. That night, I celebrated with Sarah and Mason. They were genuinely happy for me, celebrating my grandfather's foresight and my own strength. It wasn't about the money, not really. It was about the confirmation that I wasn't crazy, that their narrative of me as the ungrateful, problematic child was just that, their narrative. My grandfather's will was a public, undeniable counter-narrative. The inheritance changed things, not in terms of how I lived my day-to-day life, but in the absolute certainty it gave me. I no longer had to worry about what would happen if my career ever faltered, or if I faced unexpected expenses. The financial cushion was immense, a safety net woven from a love I hadn't fully appreciated until then. It solidified my independence, making any future attempts at financial manipulation from my parents utterly pointless. Of course, they tried. A few weeks later, Dad sent me an email, a bizarrely formal one, requesting a family meeting to discuss the trust fund. He spoke of optimizing investment strategies and ensuring the family's collective prosperity. I didn't even bother to reply. Then came Mom's tearful voicemail, talking about how worried Grandpa would be if his money caused division in the family. I deleted it without listening past the first minute. Rachel even tried to reach out on social media, sending a private message that was a mix of congratulations and thinly veiled demands. Hey, that's amazing about Grandpa's money. So happy for you. We should really get together soon. There's this great investment opportunity Dad found that you could totally get in on. I chuckled as I read it. The blatant opportunism was almost comical. I blocked her, for good this time. The final, definitive closure came a year later, just after my 30th birthday. The trust fund officially became fully accessible, and I started working with a financial advisor to manage it wisely. Around the same time, I'd been offered a significant promotion at my company, a leadership role that would require me to relocate to another city, a major hub for my industry. It was a huge step up, a chance to truly break free and build a life completely unburdened by the past. I packed up my apartment, excited for the future. Sarah, who had become an integral part of my new life, decided to move with me. We found a beautiful place overlooking a park, a far cry from the single-bedroom apartment where I'd once sat, clutching that painful letter. Before I left, I decided there was one last thing I needed to do. I typed out a short, simple email. I sent it to my parents, Rachel, and my aunt. Dear Mom, Dad, and Rachel, I wrote, I'm moving. I've accepted a new role in new city name, and will be relocating next month. I'm starting a new chapter, and I'm ready to leave the past behind. As such, I will be changing my phone number and email address, and will no longer be in contact. I wish you all well. I copied my aunt separately, adding a personal note. Thank you for everything, Aunt Carol. You've been a true family member. I'll keep in touch with you. Please pass on my new contact information only to those you genuinely believe would wish me well and respect my boundaries. Sending that email was both terrifying and exhilarating. It was the final cut, the last thread severed. I didn't wait for a response. I changed my number, created a new email address, and deleted all their old contacts. The silence this time wasn't just peaceful, it was absolute. My new life in the new city was everything I had hoped for. The new job was challenging and rewarding. Sarah and I thrived, building a home, a true partnership based on mutual respect and shared dreams. Mason remained a good friend and professional contact, and our freelance ventures continued to expand. I discovered new hobbies, made new friends, and slowly, surely, the scars of my past faded, replaced by the vibrant tapestry of a life I had built for myself. Years passed. I heard snippets through my aunt every now and then. Dad had retired early, his reputation never fully recovering. Rachel had struggled with various jobs, never quite finding her footing, still posting curated, desperate versions of her life online. Mom had become increasingly isolated, consumed by bitterness. It was a sad reality, but it was their reality, not mine. I felt no triumph, no desire to gloat. Just a quiet understanding that everyone ultimately reaps what they sow. The final resolution wasn't a dramatic confrontation or a triumphant monologue. It was a Tuesday afternoon, 5 years after I moved. Sarah and I were walking through a park, hand in hand, the sun warm on our faces. We were talking about baby names. We were expecting our first child. Suddenly, a wave of profound peace washed over me. I stopped, turned to Sarah, and simply smiled. "You know," I said, "I finally feel completely free. I don't carry that weight anymore." She squeezed my hand. "You deserve it, Travis. You built this." And she was right. I hadn't just escaped my family. I had transcended them. I had defined what family meant to me. Not blood, but loyalty, love, and respect. And the family I was building with Sarah, the life I was living, was exactly that. It was a life I had chosen, painstakingly crafted, and fiercely protected. My old family might have tried to erase me, to make me an outsider, but in doing so, they had inadvertently gifted me the opportunity to discover who I truly was, and to build a world where I was not just needed, but cherished. And that, I realized, was the most satisfying resolution of all.